Welcome to another episode of The Breakdown. Oh my gosh, kids, I can't even tell you how excited I am for today's show. This is something I'm going to make a mess of myself on this episode, which I know never ever happens. I've been doing the show for like 7 years. There are voices in this country that are so powerful that they can travel across a continent. I first heard the voice of the guest that I'm so privileged to welcome to the show in a second here, back in 2018, where she appeared with a band formerly known as A Tribe Called Red on New Year's Eve on CBC. And it absolutely knocked the wind out of me. I have been following her work since that time, and I am so excited to welcome to the show because of all the stuff that's going on in Alberta. From the other side of the country, very, very excited to welcome to the program a former poet laureate, a I don't know if former is the right term. We're going to ask that in a second. Um, a writer. There's so many things. I was up late last night trying to make sure that I got this next bit right. I am very excited to say Gway to Rebecca Thomas.
Well, Alan, thank you for having me. I'm excited. I'd introduce myself like Nin Delawisi, Rebecca Thomas, Deleoe, Jibuktuk, Migamagi, Ak, Wadabexi, Ebigwit. So like I live here in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Mi'kmaq territory, but like my family were from and registered with Lennox Island First Nation in Prince Edward Island.
Awesome. And I want to just hit on something really quick because um, I know that there is, for the Mi'kmaq, uh, there's a little bit of well, it's not pronounced like that goes on. There's the very Anglophone, oh, it's Micmac. And that's not right at all. So I just wanted to make sure that I acknowledge that right out of the gates. Because I think you did. Didn't you do a video years ago where you were like, and this is how you say it?
Maybe I can't remember, but I know like there's a ton of like regional dialectic variants and like how things are spelled and stuff, but it's always been like Mi'kmaq. And that in of itself has like an origin story because we would say that we're Ulnu, like Ulnu means like indigenous or like people, the people, right? And so we would say Ulnu of the Mi'kmaq, but it used to be Mi'kmaq with an N instead of an M, and it was like relation, trusted person. And so when colonists arrive and they'd be like, who's this? Who did? Like, oh, Niguma, Niguma. Like it's like a trusted person. And then that kind of got switched into like Micmac and Mi'kmaq. And so that's my like understanding of like the language of where it came from and that word. But yeah, we'd say like the Mi'kmaq nation, but we would say like we're Olnu, like in the same way that somebody might say they're Nietzsche or whatever, like we're Olnu, like that's who we are. Yeah.
Awesome. Before we get into the touching point of what made me finally go, oh my God, this is the window. I can get Rebecca Thomas on. I can try to do this, which is a work of yours that has, I'll be honest, I have posted one of the performances that you did of that work every year on Canada Day. Today, I get to do that in a slightly different way. I'm very excited about that. But before we get into all of that, um, who is Rebecca Thomas? That's my first question.
Oh, I do a lot of talks. I always have a little disclaimer that says that like I'm just like one person of like many Indigenous people, and that when you break it down, I'm just the scrappy kid of a residential school survivor who like grew up getting into fights and living with my white mom and doing the best that I could. Like I wouldn't say like lots of insecurities and like definitely lots of like identity, feeling fraught for a long time, less so now, but he's just a scrappy kid. Like I grew up with like dirty fingernails and barefoot outside in the country. Like, that's who I am.
What made you, and I'm going to use the word, the phrase find poetry? What made you, what drew you to that? Because I mean, the you've published multiple works. You've got a couple children's books out. You've got the book I Place You Into the Fire, the name of which is, I think, the triality of it is so cool. But like I think every teenager has that like angsty moment where they're like, I'm gonna write a sad poem about like this person who doesn't like me. But there are occasionally voices such as yours that go places with like if I was to pull up my 14-year-old hack poetry or even my lyrics from when I was doing punk music, I would be very embarrassed to show them to you because what you've done is so much more than that. So I'm curious what made you go, that's how I'm going to use my voice.
Well, first of all, I think we should all give our younger selves credit. Like the fact of like writing words and putting all of our emotions into it is a brave act to begin with, you know. So don't sell your teenage self short when it comes to your writing. But as for my writing, when it came to poetry, it was something I came to late. Like I enjoyed the writing the poetry stuff in school. I remember I wrote a poem for my friend Christy that she read at my wedding that I forgot that I had written and she had saved it. And so she read it, which I thought was quite lovely. Um, but nothing in earnest. Like I didn't write in a journal. I wrote, that's not true. I had something called my angry journal that I just wrote when I was mad as like a processing thing, but nothing with structure or anything like that. But it was when I was in my 20s and the poet laureate before me, Elle Jones, I went to one of her shows and saw her perform and I was like, I want to try to do that. And then I wrote a poem. It's called Sweetgrass in the City. It's not, I don't think it's in my book. It was the first poem I wrote. And it was just kind of like growing up, talking about like growing up like in a more kind of like urban or outside of a reserved community, but it's like my sweetgrass can still grow, that kind of thing. And I read it at an open mic that Elle hosted, and then I went back the next month and she signed me up for the open mic again. And then the third month she asked me to feature, and I was like, oh no, I have three poems. So I had to like write a bunch and then that's how it happened. And then when the poet laureate position came available, she encouraged me to apply and I got it. And that was very cool. I didn't think I would, but my dad used to like encourage me. He's like, well, child, you don't know until you know. So he encouraged me to apply for it and I did. And I think that my career kind of took off from there, I guess. I think being the first of anything, I was the first Indigenous poet laureate of the city. So I think being the first of anything gives you, I think, a little extra boost.
That may be a little bit misplaced humility, but I'll let you get away with it. Um, I'm I have so many different questions that I want to ask you, and we have to some degree limited time. But one of the things that I'd like to hear your thoughts on, because I'll be honest, when I saw the New Year's Eve performance, and I realize I'm going back almost a decade, so forgive me. I initially was unaware of the history of some of the things that you referenced in the piece that you um, delivered. I mean, spat fire is kind of where I want to. It was, man,
I
that
was so nervous during that performance. Oh God, I wanted to throw up the whole time. Toolman, like so Tim, who was one of the DJs, we were sitting like backstage and he's like, how are you feeling, Rebecca? Because like I knew him from before and I was like, look, I'm gonna throw up and I don't want to talk about it. And I like messed up in sound check and I'm not a music person and every once in a while I'll be on the bus to work and my brain will go, hey, remember that time you messed up in sound check?
but it was like such an intense performance, and you referenced so many things, and I didn't realize the paint bit
Mm.
was, and this I think speaks to the endemic nature of the problem. There was also an Indigenous person who came to Canada who was delivering some performances that had been met with people wearing headdresses and white folks, colonists, whatever we want to call us, wearing headdresses and the paint. And my initial interpretation of that was, oh, she's talking about that thing because you referenced so many different events. It wasn't until a little bit later that I realized, no, you weren't talking about that experience. You were talking about your experience. And I'm
Yeah.
wondering if you can talk a little bit about that.
Totally. I went to go see Tribe Called Red, the Hallucination. I'm actually going to go see him again next week. Excited about that. Um, and they were performing in Halifax, and it's very excited because very often you see like an Indigenous like big act come through that not only are tons of Indigenous folks like stoked to go see, but also non-Indigenous folks. Like I love that like non-Indigenous folks want to appreciate like just like the good art that we can create. And then we went there and I had like lots of my like little new friends and stuff like that. And we saw like these three non-native folks with like the war paint on their face and whatnot. And we were like, yeah, that doesn't feel good. Like, maybe they don't know, benefit of the doubt. Like, and we went over and we said, hey, like what you have on your face, it's like not really respectful, man. Like, probably should take it off. And I know that like the guys in hallucination have also talked about how like that's not stuff that they like either. And these three people were so defensive. They demanded to see our status cards as though only like I don't know, card carrying Indians could call them out on like racist acts, that kind of stuff. And we were like, all right, man, like you're gonna show your ass, that's on you. Like, and then I guess now I don't know this, but I guess like they had posted on Instagram about like going to the show, and then people then went and found them because like I was like in my head I was like I'm gonna write a poem about this, and I wrote a poem about it the next day, and I like posted it, and then it got like it took off, and I did like an interview about red face I think on CBC and stuff like that afterwards. So I think these folks might have didn't necessarily know who they were being disrespectful to. And I was like, all right, I'll just make a lesson out of you. But yeah, I just remember that just being so like, I was so shocked that like these three white folks could be so like dismissive of Indigenous people, saying, hey, that's not what that's for, of a culture that they weren't a part of. Like it was just they like as if they like were the authority on it. And that blew my mind. I was
Yeah.
just like, kind of speechless. I was like, oh, damn.
How, how did it go from that to the New Year's Eve performance? Because I mean, I go to lots of shows, and I've never been like invited to share the stage with like I don't know what the white people equivalent would be, Nine Inch Nails or something. But how did it go from you had that experience, you wrote that poem, and then you're playing New Year's Eve with, and I should just clarify for our audience, A Tribe Called Red is the name of the EDM band then. I don't know if you can dead name a band, but
I always reference back and forth.
yeah, they go by hallucination now. So
Yeah. Um, so after the night was done, I went to like I just went out, like we went to like a bar after with like some friends, and then I saw Toolman there, like uh and I went up and I was like, oh hey, like I was at the show, like really great to meet you. Just wanted to say I really enjoyed it. And then we just started chatting. And then I told them, I think, about what had happened. And he's like, man, I wish we had noticed that. We've stopped shows, that kind of thing, just to say, like, take that off your face or whatever. Um, and yeah, we just like chatted. We had a great, just very social, had a great time. And then I went home, and then I did another poetry thing in Winnipeg later on in the year. At the time, it was called the Canadian Festival of Spoken Word, and I was there with like the Halifax team, and that's where Toolman lived. And he's like, "Ah, come by the studio." And so we just like chatted for again, just like maintaining a lovely friendship. And then come the end, like I was finishing up Poet Laureate in 2018. And I have like obligations with the city to do a certain amount of events and that kind of stuff. And Tribe Called Red was going to be playing the New Year's show. And they said, they want you to come do this thing. And I was like, oh, okay then. broke free from the colonial cage. Can you see why I'm enraged? Our women go missing, our men shot and killed because they sought help for tires de-rimming. Newspapers paint the shooter as the victim, so on the inside, my war paint is dripping. It's pulling into my spirit, I'm sipping the fire. I am the physical embodiment to contrast the native inspired. With my community backing, I will line up my brothers and sisters and send you packing, because we are done with your attacking. This is Turtle Island. After centuries of being oppressed, you owe us a debt. You can go wash your face now and pay us your respects. I was
Uh,
so nervous because I'm not a music person. I love music, but I am not a musical person. I don't like music is like magical to me, and there's a part of me that doesn't want to fully understand it. Like I don't want to know how the tricks of the trade. I still want to be just like totally dazzled by incredible music. Um, and so to do it with like musicians, like true blue musicians, just made me so nervous. So nervous. But I did it.
it's probably remains one of the like, there's the meme of Bryan Cranston from Breaking Bad doing that sort of mic drop.
Yep.
That pales in comparison to just the energy that that whole show had. And I mean, I only got to see like, I don't know, the 4 minutes that they put on CBC before they were like, and now let's go to whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but watching the faces of some of the folks in the audience was amazing.
Like, but can you imagine me? So like Lido, she performed right before me. So here I am, like hallucination, Lido, and then like me being like, I write poems in my notebook, right? Like having to go to perform. And like Lido had like a baby and she was just like crushing. And I was just like, how am I supposed to perform? And like I said, because I had messed up in soundtrack, like I missed my cue and I was all flustered and like you got to do it anyway. And then I did it well in sound checks. So I got like 2 practices, and then it's like, all right, go out and do it. Like now that the live show is here. And it was so cold. It was like minus, I mean, maybe not Alberta cold, but like cold for Halifax. It was like minus 18, 19 out, and like, oh, it was brutal. But the adrenaline kept me warm. And afterwards, like, I just didn't, like Tim and Bear, like high five, like you did great. But I think I was so nervous about like I didn't want to let anyone down. Like I've just put so much pressure on myself to not let people down. And because I had messed up in sound check, I thought to myself, they must think that they've made a huge mistake. I've let them down.
Well, you absolutely crushed it. I want to talk about one of your specific works, and this is why this was the window that I finally found to rationalize, finally reaching out and being like, please, 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 please. Um, and I don't know if you're familiar with how badly we're doing in Alberta right now. Things are not going great.
Yeah, you've had better days.
We have definitely had better days. The whole separation thing. I mean, it's been absolutely I don't know what the words would be. I should ask a poet. Um, but to watch the chiefs and the leaders of all of the treaties come together and be like, "Oh hell no," to the province of Alberta has been historic. Is the only word that I can think of to describe it. But there is this pattern of behavior in Alberta that we see where there's this almost entitlement that comes from I'm going to use the term colonizers. If my audience has issues with that, whatever, I don't care. But where the colonizers are like trying to define how Indigenous people, First Nations people, Métis people have to behave. Like, get over it seems to be a lot of the rhetoric that's unfortunately used, and there's a complete disrespect for. Often there's a complete disrespect for the treaties, the meaning behind the treaties, the significance of the treaties, and this separation bullshit is. It's just I have no
Mhm.
words to describe it. And you wrote a piece, and this is the creation story piece. The first question I have to ask is like some of the imagery that you bring out in that poem. I don't know whether or not it's like officially, I don't know if the word would be canon,
Mm.
a part of the poem, but there's the video that I share every year is the one where you open with when they cut out a maple leaf and laid the square over the red territory. They told us it wouldn't be so bad, but then they raised our white covered stolen lands to be flown as the Canadian flag. That knocks my socks off every time I read it. Every time I hear it, is that part of the story, or was that just like or the canon piece, or is that was that just you spitting some fire before you did the performance?
I think that was just like the imagery of it. Like I really do like being like I see so many things in my head as like pictures, like as a movie, like and so for me, like I was thinking of like the symbolism of that, and it's like you if you take the Canada flag and you remove like the white, I imagine it's a solid red flag, like it's like territory from coast to coast to coast, all Indigenous lands, and then this like white inlay was put over it, and I remember I had a great conversation with a Wolastoqey artist, Emma Hashinkow Purley, pronouncing her name incorrectly. She showed me an incredible piece of visual art where she printed out the Indian Act and cut it into strips and then glued it over the red parts of the flag. And it was like such an incredible piece of visual art, and like this notion of like using the flag as this like very symbolic thing of like territory of land. Like Emma's was like definitely planted that seed of inspiration, and this idea of like I've heard it before where it's like laying a white piece of cloth over the red and the red bleeding through. Like there's just so much good imagery with that. And like for me, I think back to that treaty piece of like, we're going to sign treaties, like it's not going to be so bad, we're going to share this land. And then didn't go that way, right?
Yeah.
So it's like this, like you're hypocrites. And I'm going to let you know, like we can move forward, but you have to be a participant. Otherwise, you just have to look at your hypocrisy in the face and deal with it.
And that's one of the things that's so striking to me about your poem, because Canadian identity as a concept is, boy is it hard and boy is it complex. And there's a lot of people who like to say things like, oh, post-nationalist state and we have no identity and rena. And I think that's just lazy commentary. But the to define the ideals of Canada is very, very difficult because we have this horrifying history. That's part of the national story, and there's no getting around that. And one of the things that I find so striking about your work is you're taking zero prisoners. You're when you go through the story, it is there's not like, oh, I don't want to hurt your feelings. There's none of that. But there is at the end, there is that invitation to be like, hey, it's really messed up. Do you want to help fix it? And like, how how do you get there? I guess is my question. Because there's so much rage and anger and disappointment and hurt and then you're still able to make the pivot in the poem to um that olive branch.
Yeah, I think for me, there's like a deep pragmatism. There's like a really like I can't say all okay, like all non-Indigenous people like pack up, go home, like go back to where you came from, like that language, like that so emulates the language of the people who seek to cause harm like in our country. And like so to like embody that doesn't feel good. Like we are welcoming nations. We signed treaties on purpose. We sought to provide like care for people who need it. And like being true to that feels very true to my culture, I guess, or like to me, like my understanding of being Indigenous is that like, and so it's for me, it's like that practical approach of like, well, we can sit around and, spit daggers at each other and just be just hateful, or we can figure a way to move forward. Like it's like that kind of like we have, I don't know, for me, I feel like we have no choice to but move forward. But there is that like accountability piece. And I think sometimes people thinks accountability is the same thing as punishment. And I don't think that's the case at all. I'm a big believer in like restorative justice. I don't think mandatory minimum sentencing for crimes is helpful at all in any way, shape, or form. And I think if we want to have that restorative piece come back, we need to at least, those of us who have capacity to allow community for people to come back to. Because if someone's harmed a community or a country or a group of people, if we say there's nothing for you to come back to, I just want you to sit and stew and feel awful about your choices, and there is no roadway back to coming back to community and to find that, then what is the impetus to want to change? If there is nothing soft or beautiful or comforting waiting for you once you've changed. And so I think, and I see that compassion in my family. I saw that compassion with like all of my stepmoms when my dad would sober up and come home, and like to see the compassion that exists for people who have done really awful things. And you see sometimes those people end up being the biggest advocates and supporters and of your cause or of your people or of you as an individual, if you allow people space to change and grow and to learn. And I think so often we don't allow for that. We go, you fucked up, I want nothing to do with you, but go feel bad forever. And I don't think that's helpful, right? Because it takes away potential relationships and support and opportunities for change. I guess that's where my capacity is. I look to that. Doesn't mean I'm not going to be angry and furious and all that sort of stuff. Like many things can exist at the same time.
Yeah. It's striking to me, and one of the things that I find humbling is the the capacity for all of the things that you just described exists, it seems like, more on the side of the folks who have been the recipient of the overwhelming majority of the harm and the ill will. Um, like it just baffles me how I'm not going to use that word. Um, how the recipients
Mm.
of all of that are the ones who are able to go, hey, but you know what? Let's try to find a path forward together. And we've got these separatist assholes here in Alberta that are like, no, you can trust the white men this time. Like literally, I've been making that joke for years. I ran it by a former band leader, and he was like, "It's a funny joke. You can use it." I'm like, "Okay, cool." But we have this leader of the Republican Party in Alberta, which I can't believe I can say that and be accurate right now. But
Mhm.
he was like, no, no, you can trust the Republican Party of Alberta to renegotiate the treaties. And I was like, oh my God, the joke is actually happening. I cannot believe this. And
Yeah.
it's just, it's so, um, I don't know what the word is. Again, it's baffling to me. Um, what was the impetus for writing the poem?
Like Creature Canada?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was just like an invitation. When I was poet laureate, a lot of things were happening. It was like Canada 150. It was like the 100-year anniversary since the Halifax explosion. And so again, like part of my duties was to do things. And I was invited to write that by The Coast, which was like a kind of like a local arts like weekly free paper or whatever. And they had me guest edit the paper for that like that issue. And so then I wrote, yeah, I was like, I'll write this. And so that's what I wrote. And then I was invited to speak at the Walrus Talks for Canada 150. And so I did it there. And then I can't show it to you, but there was an Indigenous artist, Joshua Palasteckley. And so he did a beautiful like picture of it, of all these people riding the top of like Creature Canada, like on top of Turtle Island, and they're all pointing in different directions to like lead it. So he did a really beautiful piece of art for it. That was the cover of that issue. And yeah, I don't know. It was just like wanting to tell a story, but maybe a story that was a little bit different, because I think so much of my attempt to like change people's minds is to just kind of be like, I'm just gonna just hold the sphere up. You tell me if you like what you see. I'm just gonna wait here on the sides. Like, I don't know. There is a strong accountability in my language, but I think sometimes there's also, I always try to like, I'm gonna like my friend Lindsay did a feature on me, Lindsay Glowed Raining Bird. And she talks about how I'll like knock you down with one hand, but then offer the other one to help you up. And I think that just maybe comes from seeing compassion role modeled in my family. That like there is, I think people inherently want to be good, but I think they're also really afraid of something bad happening to them, or change or whatever. But I also want to make room for the people who are so full of rage that they don't ever want to talk or negotiate. Like that's allowed too. Not everybody has to be on board. Just hopefully enough to maybe change direction, you know.
Yeah. Um, I, how much time do I have left with you? Like, I know we're doing this during your lunch hour,
Oh,
and
don't worry about it. I'm fine.
because I don't want to be like, and somewhere there's a sandwich sitting just out of frame, looking sad. Um,
No, my chicken salad sandwich is in the fridge. Thank you very
okay,
much.
perfect, good stuff. Um, I am going to ask you to I don't, what's the word? What is the correct word when you
I
ask to
don't
put
know.
read,
Like
recite,
recite, read,
perform? I don't
yeah.
know.
So the question I asked, because when, so I have like the Creature Canada, like that's like the really long story with a little bit of poetry at the end. That's the one that you want me to read, or do you want me to read, like, was it, because you referenced, I think one of the things you referenced was from Are You a Good Canadian, about like the white square over red territory. That's from Are You a Good Canadian? And then there's the, if what you talk about, what you share, is it like the visual graphic? It's like an orange screen and then it has like,
No, I do
okay.
the walrus one is the one
Oh,
you.
okay. Yeah, then I can do that one, because the other one that was, it was the opening to Canada 150 on the CBC. They did like a super cut of a bunch of my poems. Like, so we took
Okay.
stuff out and made them together. And then they did a really cool visual graphic. And then when the broadcast started for Canada 150 across Canada, they played that super cut of my poetry. So I was just like, oh no, I don't have the super cut. Anyway.
Yeah, no, if you'd be willing to read the I think that might be where the why I was like the flag bit. I don't think that's in the
No.
creation story one, but it's such powerful imagery that I didn't want to just be like, and let's not talk about it because it is such intensely powerful imagery. I can't look at one of the things that I've learned is that there's two things that I can't look at a Canada flag without thinking about now.
Mm,
One of them is the fucking convoy, and the other one is that piece of prose.
yeah.
It's just so, and I tend to focus on that one because the
And
convoy
like,
stuff.
isn't that a shame, the way things get co-opted to be seen as like a terrible thing? Like this notion of like being woke, for example, which is like originated like way back from like the 1920s, about being aware of like Black struggle in America. Like, and now all of a sudden that gets like co-opted, and you know, seeing like the language of treaty as though that is like uh a desire for like no progress or whatever. Like, you know, like this notion, it's just such a shame that really important words get taken away from like their original meaning, I guess. And like, you know, whether seeing that in Alberta. And one thing I do want to talk about, just like, or not talk about, but like touch on, is like, I don't know as much about, say, like the number treaties, so like treaty 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., versus like our treaties or peace and friendship treaties, and they're like pre-confederation. Are the number treaties post-confederation?
It kind of.
Yeah, which I think
So
makes them different than our treaties that were signed over like on this side.
it's complicated because the treaties predate the formation of the province. So
Mm,
Canada was 1905. I think most of the treaties, I don't want to script the dates and be that guy. They're for sure before 1905.
yes.
And and I believe they came just after Confederation. I'm going to get roasted on this if I'm wrong, and I
Confederation, I
apologize.
think, was 1867.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I feel like most of the number treaties were shortly after. I
yeah,
could be wrong.
yeah.
And I'll own that right out of the gates. But they all predate Alberta. And
Oh,
that's the important piece I think that people
absolutely.
need to keep in mind because like the geographic boundaries of the treaties that influence Alberta, I can actually say govern Alberta. Those boundaries do not align with the geographic boundaries of Alberta. They like cross over into Saskatchewan,
Yeah, and like that's like the
all over
whole
the
Jay
place.
Treaty too, about like the United States, where it like started off with the Wabanaki Confederacy because like our territories of like those nations like span the U.S. Canada border, which allowed for like indigenous people to live and work in the United States because it's like, well, it's their territory, that kind of thing. But I remember I watched like the little clip of like that, like the chief speaking about how like we do not agree. You're going to take on every single First Nation in Alberta. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, man, like you fucked up. Like those are like that's they're community boys when they show up to like a press conference and they're wearing like worn out jeans and like a button down that you can tell is like one of their old ones from their closet. They got their cell phone tucked in their breast pocket, but like the big headdresses. And I was like, every like the don't give a fuck about casual like dress while challenging authority. Like to me, that also speaks to like a huge subversion, like metaphorically or visually, to be like addressing like the premier, the crown, the nation in casual like dress, like shows to me being like, I don't respect your suit, your title, because that is not who we're negotiating with. And I think that like the visualization of that to me, like all of these like community boys in the background, like that symbolism was very powerful to me. Being like, you're here to respect me because I'm a nation leader, not because I have a fancy $4,000 suit or whatever. Like, I really love that. It's also very terrifying when you're on the other side of it because I did an interview once and there was like 8 chiefs on the other who were interviewing me for like, I don't know, like a position of something. And they're like in t-shirts and I'm like, oh no, I'm not getting this job.
And that's the thing, like with the whole situation, the thing I find myself looking at is like the former he's now former Minister of Indigenous Affairs. He lost that position. Can't imagine why.
Mm.
But like his response was, "I want to run away and hide." And like, yeah, I can totally get that. Maybe don't say that into a hot mic, but I can totally understand what he said. But like the legacy of that thing, knowing that part of your period in public service was you managed to accomplish that. You managed to get those chiefs that pissed off at you. You tell that story to the grandkids. Like I want to be a fly on the wall when that happens.
Yeah.
Because it's
And and to like get all the leaders like on side too, especially in like an economy like Alberta, where I'm sure you're gonna have some First Nations who are like, no, we're totally against extraction. And then you're gonna have other First Nations that say, no, we're pro-extraction because it's good for our communities. And to get all of those people on side against, you fucked up.
yeah,
You fucked up.
boy.
That much unity.
But I think it's also one of the things that I was grateful for in that moment was, and again, there's a dissonance that I experienced with this because um, it in Alberta in particular, and certainly in other parts of the country as well, the number of times that First Nations folks are the ones who save us from our own damn stupidity is bonkers. Like it's just ridiculous, and it felt really weird for me as like the white colonizer to be watching that press conference and going like, fucking thank God. Like, I'm so glad that they're showing up. I wish that our leadership did that, but I'm so glad that somebody has the stones to. And it was so raw and emotional. Like the one chief who threw the bill into the air, the emotion in his voice, like you can't fake that. And it was just it's such an embarrassingly proud moment is the only way that I can really.
Yeah, I mean, like not to put my own work out there, but I think of like the poem that I wrote about like water is life, and I had this like line that says even the greediest of men needs clean water too. Like so, it's like we're doing it for you as well. Like that's what you don't see is like when we shut down railroads or blockade highways or prevent like drilling or clear cutting or whatever. We're not just doing it for us, we're doing it for you too. And you don't see that the tremendous amount of risk that Indigenous people are taking on, whether it be public perception or like physical risk of assault or police violence, you know, or like just physical harm from being out in the elements like for so long. We're not just doing it for First Nations people. We're not just doing it because we want everybody to like live impoverished, whatever that may be. Like we're doing it for you as well, because even the greediest of men need water, clean water too, right? And I don't think that there's an acknowledgement or an understanding of that, right? And that's what I think where my that's where like my rage or my deep sadness is like you're not seeing us. We're trying to protect you.
Yeah. Um, where can people like? I hate to do the plug thing, but I really want to do the plug thing. Where can people find your works? Because, like I said, I Place You Into the Fire is that's one of my like camper comfort, sit in quiet and just like soak that book up. Where can people? But you're also doing like you've done. Correct me if I'm wrong. Two children's books.
Three children's books. And then I have a fourth one coming out in the fall. And I'm trying to write a novel. But you can find them, I don't know, anywhere, like chapters, you can Google it, you'll find it on, you can buy directly from the publishers. So Nimbus and Anik are my two publishers. You can find it there. And yeah, and they're both Canadian presses. And especially with my children's book, I really try to use my leverage to kind of like uplift folks. So every single illustrator has been an Indigenous woman or queer person who has illustrated my books as well. So that's really cool. So you're not just, you know, supporting me, you're supporting them by purchasing those pieces too. So yeah, anywhere. You can just Google it.
Perfect. Anything else you want people to hear? Anything else you want to say? If I want to give you the open floor before I ask you to read.
Yeah. I think I always say like I want people to see Indigenous people as like whole people. Like we don't walk around feeling like oppressed all the time. Like I'm very proud to be Indigenous. Like I'm very like there's more to me than just like the hard stuff, right? That we're funny and we're talented and we're smart and like I think our practices and worldviews are good and can actually probably be applied beyond just Indigenous stuff. I think that's probably Canada's greatest failing when it comes to like that. It's like, well, we'll do stuff for Indigenous people. We'll just little programs, little something over here just for you. Mm. But in reality, those programs would probably be pretty helpful, like overall. Like, for example, we do have that like the ISETS program, which is like a Indigenous secondary education and training program. Like that's where that misnomer of like, oh, school is free for Native people. And it's like, nah, actually, it's not free. We have a federal funding program that gets disseminated amongst the provinces, but then our leadership gets certain amounts of funds and then they help cover the cost of post-secondary for folks who are approved of and apply, blah, blah, blah. And like, wouldn't that be tremendously helpful if people could get training and education and not graduate up to their eyeballs in debt? So, you know, looking at like programs that we have for our community members and how they would be helpful for us, as well as our worldview. So we have like Nebigalimp, which means like, it's like our conservation, like I can have enough, but no more than enough. Imagine if everybody thought that way, or like how we distributed wealth, like that kind of stuff, right? It would be so helpful, but I think that Canada is like, oh, well, that's Native stuff. Keep that over here. And I'm like, actually, pretty helpful. across the whole country. What do you think? You know, so I think that's probably what I want people to hear is that like our ideas are good, but not just for us. I think they're good for everything, but it needs to be done in collaboration.
I
Because if
love that you
you're
brought up
not, oh, sorry to say, because if you're not applying it right, then that's on you.
I love that you brought up the funny piece. I am not a TikToker. I'm terrible. I can't go down that rabbit hole because I have limited time and limited bandwidth. My wife, she has the TikTok. I'm already sound the TikTok. But there's a few Indigenous creators and First Nations creators that I've made her follow, because I have laughed at some things on TikTok. The only times that I have laughed to the point of not being able to breathe are some of the First Nations and Indigenous content creators
Oh
because
God, so funny.
oh my God, I love the approach to humor,
Hmm.
and the way that many First Nations and Indigenous folks can point out the silliness of white folks like myself, um, brutally but gently. Again, it's that combination of the two, and I've had the privilege to be the recipient of that on a few occasions where elders have been like, "I'm going to explain to you how silly you sound right now." Um, but I'm going to do it in a way that does not inflict harm.
Yeah, absolutely. Humor and teasing are like such valuable ways to teach lessons without imparting shame or like fear. Like it can be corrective in such like a gentle and funny way. And I think that that is like one of our is like great strength. I think like Native people are some of the funniest people on the planet. And I absolutely like adore us for that. And I think part of that is born out of like the shit we've had to wade through in life. I wish I could give credit to the original person who tweeted this, but it's like it's stayed with me forever. And it says, did you have a good childhood or are you funny? And and, and like that's how I feel. Like, yeah, did you have a nice childhood or are you funny? And I think that that speaks so much to like resilience. And it'd be great if we didn't have to be resilient, et cetera, et cetera. But we are here and we are resilient. And we're funny because of it. And like there's something to be said for how we teach with that humor and like with that like pain. And there's lots of stuff we can talk about around like generational trauma and all that sort of stuff. But I think that gets like studied to death. And I think that's get talks about to death. And that's what gets like written about. And there's not enough, I think, focus on the fact that like man, we're fucking hilarious.
Oh yeah. Yep. Very long story short, I crossed paths with a Siksika elder a few years ago, and through a series of circumstances, I was working out on the reservation there, and crossed paths with a bald eagle, and of course, I'm a white person, so I thought it was a really big deal. And shortly after that encounter, I crossed paths with one of the elders from the community, and we did the things that we needed to do. And then I was like, I asked her like, hey, I'm just curious. Um, this is a story about the bald eagle. What do you think? Did it mean anything? And she got so serious. Boy, did she get me because she got so serious and she like leaned in and got like deadly, deadly serious. And she goes, yeah, I think it means you saw a bald eagle. It was just it was absolute because she had been talking about how she had come back to the nation, after being away from it for a long time in order to try to bring back some of the culture that had been forgotten and some of the teachings and beliefs that had been forgotten. And so I was like, oh, I get to talk to somebody who knows the things, and I was so excited. And it was just such a wonderfully gentle but absolute way of being like, you're being stupid.
Oh, yeah. And like sometimes you go to like an elder and you're thinking like I'm gonna get some sagely advice. And there was this one elder, and my dad was like has recently passed away, but like when he was like sick last year, and I was like I was the power of attorney, so I'm making all these decisions and I'm trying to do all this sort of stuff. And there was another person in my dad's life who was not pleased that I think that I was power of attorney and like made things so challenging to like navigate, like made a hard situation way more hard than it needed to be. And I like went to the like we were doing an event all day and there was an elder there and I went in and I was like upset and I said, do you mind if I sit here? And I was trying to ask like a question and whatnot. And then she's the same thing, like she like leans in, she's like, are you one of the oldest daughters? And I was like, well, yeah, middle child. Like she's like, yeah. I think she's just fucking jealous. She's like, thank you. Like I started cracking up, like it was just like that. You're expecting like some very deep wisdom, and then she's like, I just think she's fucking jealous.
It's such a gift. It's such a gift. Um, and on that note of
Yes.
gifts,
Oh
if
yes, yes. Sorry. We're just kind of going all over the place.
no, I like I said at the beginning, this is a conversation, and I'm so grateful that you granted the time for it. But I mean, we're going to be releasing this on just before Canada Day, uh,
Okay.
and so if you would be so kind as to up my tradition to like the
Sure.
I'm never going to top this level.
No, I'm gonna put on my glasses. I'm getting old.
I've
Can't
got my
see
Cindy right over
shit.
here.
All right. So it's gonna look real intense. It's gonna look like I'm looking at you, but I put the poem in front of me here. Okay. So yeah, it's a creation story. It's called Creature Canada. I just want to make sure that it is the correct version. Yes, okay, great. Um, so today I'm going to tell you a creation story. Many of you have heard them before, or at the very least have heard of them. So we tell stories to pass on our knowledge, teach lessons and morals. This story is going to be a bit different than any other story you might have heard before because it's not about Gahawedge Crow. It's not about Mooin Bear. It's not about Glooskap, who is the mythical hero of the Mi'kmaq people. It's a new story with old roots that cannot be appropriated. So long before time immemorial, when there were only the plants, animals, spirits, magical creatures, and the original people that roamed this land, there was peace. Yes, sometimes people did not get along, but there was a consensus of how things were and would always be. There was a balance between Mother Earth and us, her children. The animals gave what they could, and we honored them for their sacrifice. We never picked the first plant, nor the second. We would only begin to pick when we found the third plant, so that we knew we were never picking the last ones. We lived like this for more generations than you can count on all the fingers of your family. Then one day, a new creature came to our shores. At first, this creature was small, hidden. We didn't even know it existed. It came tucked away in the minds of the newcomers, finding shelter in the intentions of those who brought it. At first, it did not have much power. It did not have a voice, only an inkling of a presence. And we were strong. We kept it at bay. We kept it subdued. But the creature wasn't the only thing the newcomers brought. On their clothes, in their sweat, laced into their warm exhales with something deadly. Sickness. The diseases burned through our people at an alarming rate. No man, woman, or child could escape the illnesses. As we began to die, the creature grew stronger. For the first time, the creature could speak. It whispered into the ears of the newcomers, influenced their actions. With each task completed, the creature grew stronger, more powerful. It consumed our despair until it took shape. Once it took a form, its hunger could not be sated. Its endless greed consumed all the trees, hunted the animals, and fished the rivers until they knew only scarcity. It cracked open the body of Mother Earth and bled her black veins, choked out the sky with smoke. It always picked the first plant, every time. The original people were helpless against its will. And this creature cared not for our hearts and spirits because it knew that deep down we could stand against it. So it tried to control us. It confined us to the tiniest portions of our land. It rewarded those that would do its bidding with medals of valor and statues. This creature fed on the languages of our children, separated families to weaken us. It thrived, nameless, until a dozen generations ago, when it was finally given a name, Canada. Canada's skin was made up of laws. It had sharp claws that raked schisms into our communities so that we would fight ourselves. We began to do Canada's work for it. We shamed our people, kept ourselves under control out of fear for what Canada might do to us. And we had heroes that took it on, but were often punished harshly. Some of us tried to run away only to discover Canada was endless and vast and cold. Sadly, we had those that gave up the fight. Canada tricked many of our people into believing it was right. But in the smallest of places, our flame still burned on. At first, resistance was small. Children whispered their languages out of earshot of Canada in the corners of the schools. We met in secret to share our stories and pass down our elders' knowledge. We learned from each other. People that once warred were allies, exchanging dance and song, though always cautiously. But then one day, unexpected to Canada, the people who brought it to this land started to see it for what it was. You see, Canada was only as strong as the people allowed it. Its power was drawn from the hearts and minds of those who believed in it. It became what it was because it had only ever fed on hate and fear and prejudice. Canada, as strong and as powerful as it was, had a weakness. It was blind. Canada couldn't see another world. It could only see what it thought the world should look like. It could not see what we did behind its back. It could not see peripherally. Though it was strong, the strongest foe the first people had ever met, because it had no vision, we were able to resist and persist. We created defenses. We wrote them down together, the original people and the newcomers. They were promises to each other that would live on generation to generation. These promises still exist and are used to keep Canada in check. And though it might try to break these bonds, as long as we are still breathing, they cannot be undone. Today, Canada is still alive and well. It continues to pull power from the broken body of Mother Earth. It continues to feed off our spirits through neglect and hopelessness. But all is not lost. Because it is blind, it can be led to where we want to take it. As we navigate these sidewalks of concrete and steel, past buildings of steel, they've shaken out the earth from our hearts to mix the cement, demanding we yield to progress. We have been called history and relics for losing our roots, that we've replaced our moccasins with that Nike swoosh, but those observations are coming from you, so full of yourself that you're blind to our truths. We keep beads in our pockets, dropping handfuls from time to time to roll back into the cracks of the streets with which we are still so entwined. We stand tall with our fish scale eyes, reflecting back the resilience to those who look to us, expecting to see a broken nation. But our spirits have awoken from their colonized hibernation. Your skyscrapers are tall but static. They've stopped climbing. They've got nothing on us because we are still rising. The story is not over. So will you help us write the next chapter? So there you go.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
That's uh you got me. um uh
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
yeah, no. It's such it's so good. It's just so good.
Thank you.
Rebecca, thank you so much for taking the time to chat today. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate this. I know how much this is going to resonate, especially that last bit with the audience of the show. Um, and yeah, I just thank you so much.
Nobody and nothing is a lost cause. People can do the most egregious things and still turn around tomorrow and decide to do something good and helpful. And I think hopefully that's what people get from this. You don't have to be pot committed. You don't have to go all in because of something you thought or believed many years ago. You can change your mind and you can be better. So be better. That's better is better. I think that's an Obama quote or something. I don't know, but be better, I think.
I'm gonna let the poet have the last word on that one. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me.
And that's it for another episode of The Breakdown. As always, if you appreciate the kind of content that we're trying to produce here, we would love nothing more than if you thought about signing up to be one of our Patreon sponsors at www.patreon.com/thebreakdownab, where for just the price of a fancy cup of coffee a month, you can help us continue to produce this kind of content. Whether you're listening to the audio version of the podcast, in which case, maybe leave a review and a rating, or whether you're watching it on one of our streaming platforms, we want to say a big thank you to everybody who is part of the Breakdown's audience. And as always, take care of each other and keep the conversation going.